you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Well, hello there. It is The Bill Press Show. Here we are on Wednesday. My God, it's the last day of February already?
Unbelievable.
It is unbelievable.
I know. It's not even a leap year, so we don't get an extra day.
Leap years, by the way, I am here for. I love a good leap year. Wasn't last year a leap year?
I don't know.
I think last year was a leap year. No leap year this year. You're right. So we're done with February as of tomorrow. But here we are on the last day of February 28th, and look who it is. Look who it is. It's me, your old pal Peter. Sitting in for Bill again. I swear Bill was here like 5 minutes ago. He was here. He came in. Yet again, he had...
he was using sign language this morning to communicate that his voice had not improved.
He attempted to tell us that he wasn't, that his voice wasn't doing much better by using sign language. Mm-hmm. For a radio podcast version of the show, that probably wouldn't go very well.
No, not too well. Unless everyone were to go to our YouTube channel, which can be found at www.youtube.com/TheBillPressShow.
Ray, you're a natural already at this. Look at this already.
Okay, but look, we actually are so close to reaching 11,000 subscribers. We're less than 100 away from it. So if everyone could hit the subscribe button.
Folks, we could do that today.
We could easily do that.
Can we not do that today?
We could definitely.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. And like, we always tweet out the link to the day's show, and I appreciate everybody that clicks on it and watches it. That's really, really, really cool because you see it on Twitter or you get in the habit or whatever. But like, if you subscribe, you get all the stuff that we put up there, and you get notified, and you get all the good content, and plus it helps us out.
And
help us out.
It's free.
Don't cost nothing.
It's $0.
It don't cost nothing.
Yeah.
So go there, go take it's not even much of an extra step. Just hit the button that says subscribe. That way you're signed up, you're a part of the team, you get all the stuff that we put up there. Yeah, so look, as I said, Bill is not here today. He tried to do the show, but we had to send him home just because he didn't sound so good. He didn't have much of a voice. So I am going to be doing the show today again on last minute's notice. But we got lots of stuff to talk about today. We've got Simone Pathe from Roll Call to talk about some of the races around the country and what is the fate of little Bob Corker. Is he going to run? Is he not going to run? We thought he wasn't going to. Then maybe he was. But I think Simone has the final story on the legacy of Bob Corker. Also, in the second hour of the program, for the hour, our buddy Evan McMorris Santoro is going to be coming in to sit in for the hour. And we'll be joined by Emily Atkin, science and environmental politics reporter for the New Republic. Just to pick up on something that we talked about yesterday around this time, teachers in West Virginia are back to work. The strike is over. Their governor, Jim Justice, came forward and said that they are going to give them a raise. In fact, we have a clip from Jim Justice, the last clip that we played, where he says what it's going to look like, what these teachers are going to get. They wanted a raise. They're going to get a raise.
Teachers and all the educators are going to get a 5% raise in the first year, and everyone else is going to get a 3% raise across the board first year.
All right, so we talked yesterday how West Virginia, out of the 50 states, they were 48th in what they pay their teachers. 5% raise should put them up to like 44?
Maybe 45, 44.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Maybe the 5% increase, maybe the 5% raise will be just enough for them to buy a new gun whenever we start arming teachers.
Just enough to bump them into the next tax bracket.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe a $1.50 increase.
A $1.50 increase, yeah. They could get a Costco membership. Hey, come on. What are we giving them grief for? They could get a Costco membership. Do they sell guns at Costco? I bet they don't. Anyway, folks, stick around. Stick with us. We're going to jump right into the big part of the show here in just a moment. We're going to take a very, very quick break, and then we're going to come back and tell you the latest in the ballad of Jared Kushner. Oh, gosh, am I excited to talk about this. Stay tuned. It's the Bill Press Show.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
Yes, indeed. Here we are on a February 28th on the Bill Press Show. My name is Peter Ogburn, sitting in for Bill today, who still has no voice. Poor guy came in and thought he was going to try and do the show today, but we sort of made an executive decision. He should just go home and rest his voice. So you have me today, and I will try and carry Mr. Press's voice for him. And gosh, we have a lot to talk about. First of all, don't forget, folks, we have our podcast up on iTunes and anywhere else that you get your podcasts. It's the Bill Press Show. Just go search for it. And we put it up pretty much right after the show. So if you missed the show or you want to go back and hear something, some of our, frankly, revelatory insights that we make during the program. I mean, gosh, you can't catch them all in the first go-round.
I mean, it's 2 hours of it,
It's 2 hours. I mean, we don't waste a move here. Everything is gold. And by the way, if you're listening to us on WCPT in Chicago or on Indiana Talks, or you're streaming it on TuneIn or iHeartRadio or wherever you're listening to the show, if you just listen to us terrestrially, you can't hear the whole show. We do a little preview, a little pre-show stuff that's only in the podcast. So go check that out. Just download the podcast, subscribe. It sends right to your iPhone or Android or whatever it is that you use. I got to tell you, so easy. So easy. Well, gosh, it's so hard to figure out where to begin on news days like this, right? Because there's a ton of things that happened yesterday. I mean, fairly momentous things. You had Hope Hicks, who appeared in front of the House Intelligence Committee in a closed-door session and apparently didn't have much to say. She invoked her executive privilege. She said that, or Adam Schiff said that she talked about things during the campaign and during the transition, but once Donald Trump took the oath of office, that was it. She wouldn't talk about anything else and invoked her executive privilege, which we're going to get to a point here very soon where we're going to find out just how ironclad that executive privilege really is. We're going to find out whether or not the White House can actually hide behind that when it comes to their aides, right? Steve Bannon did this. Hope Hicks is now doing it. I'm not so sure that that's going to hold up.
I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say no. I really feel strongly that this is all going to break down for them very soon. And gosh, won't that be just a crying shame? I will hate that. Meanwhile, today is the day that Billy Graham lies in state here at the Capitol Rotunda. Here's a very interesting story. Very, very interesting story. The last time that a private citizen lay in state here in Washington, D.C. in the United States Capitol was Rosa Parks. We talked about that, Rosa Parks. Before that, it was Ronald Reagan. Now, the big thing around town is Congress is not going to be doing any work because, we can't do any work because we have the Reverend Dr. Billy Graham lying in state. We couldn't possibly do any work when we have someone lying in state. That's not something we can do. We can't actually go and have session and get things done and work. And, we got to have some sort of honor.
You would think someone was always lying in the Capitol.
Yeah, right. You would think so, Ray. Here's the thing, though. They continued their work when Rosa Parks laid in state. They continued their work when Ronald Reagan laid in state.
Because they have important things to do, Peter.
That's right. That's right. You know why they're shutting down work?
Why?
While Billy Graham is laying in state? So that they don't have to do a damn thing on gun control. They don't have to answer any questions. They don't have to go do any work on it. They don't have to figure out what the hell they're going to do to hold back this onslaught of action that Americans are taking. They don't have to do anything because how could they possibly do any work when they got Billy Graham laying in state?
Here's the thing. This is not going to blow over in 3 days.
No, it's not.
It's not going to. So even if they run away for the rest of the week,
yep,
these kids are still going to be online.
Still going to be there.
These companies are still going to be cutting ties with the NRA because the public is now demanding it.
Yeah. It's not going to go away. It really is not going to go away. And I mean, look, this whole idea that they can escape it temporarily, cute. really cute. Okay? Like, we see it. We see what you're doing. But it's just not going to work. It's going to completely backfire on them.
I completely agree. If anything, I think that it will make people even angrier and even more like ready to pounce as soon as they're back.
Yeah. By the way, I should apologize. I didn't introduce you. That, of course, is Ray Rogers running the board this morning. Hello, Ray.
You usually see the back of my head if you watch the screen.
That's right. That's right. If you're watching, you see you're normally in the other chair. But again, this is one of those mornings where we all had to swoop into action, and
we're in the upside down.
I didn't know you were in the upside down. I didn't know I was going to host. You didn't know you were going to run the board, and here we are.
Paul Ryan's a Demogorgon. And so is Mitch McConnell.
What is that a reference to? That's a reference to Stranger Things. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that the whole thing? I don't watch that show, Ray.
Okay, well, I mean, just taking at face value, Stranger Things is an adequate title for the past year.
There you go. That's pretty spot on. That's pretty spot on. I tried to watch Stranger Things, but I can tell you, I think I've just settled on the fact that I don't like child actors. I don't like child actors.
Really? Those kid actors are so good, though.
Not for me.
Okay.
Not for me. I thought I was going to love It. I went and watched It in the movie theater.
Uh-huh.
Hated it.
So
who cares about these kids? I don't care.
Do you only like them when they're like 18 and older? Or like what's the age where they're no longer child actors?
I can't think of a child actor that I saw and I was like, oh, wow, what a great and gripping performance that child actor did.
Peter. Shirley Temple.
Ray, I'm not that old. God. Anyway, God, I want to jump right into the Jared Kushner story because cue the world's tiniest violin. I'm going to read this headline from Politico. Jared Kushner loses access to top secret intelligence. No. Poor Jared Kushner. Oh. The fancy lad himself no longer has a top secret intelligence clearance, and gosh, don't I feel bad about that. I just, there's a lot going on here, right? I'll sort of try and peel the layers of this onion, right? But let's start with the fact that Jared Kushner never should have had a security clearance. If he can't get one now, over a year after Donald Trump has been president, why the hell did he have one for this whole time? Richard Blumenthal, Senator Richard Blumenthal, sort of talked about this a little bit yesterday. He was asked about these sort of temporary clearances that the White House has been very generous with handing out, and he says this is a problem, and here is why.
My main concern right now is that there are an unknown number of high-level White House officials with continued access to the nation's secrets when they may have very damaging secrets in their own backgrounds that could subject them to blackmail or worse.
Okay, now a lot of Republicans and conservatives yesterday came out and said that Blumenthal, no, this was earlier in the day yesterday. A lot of Republicans and conservatives came out and said, no, that's not possible. That wouldn't be possible. Look, the White House still has a security wall around it. When you work in there, this isn't going to be a thing. Well, fast forward to the Washington Post putting out a story saying that not only could Jared Kushner be targeted by outside forces, he has been. 4 different foreign powers have looked at Jared Kushner and his business ties. They've looked at the fact that he has, I think it would be an understatement to say that he has some troubled financial dealings, certainly shady financial dealings. He's racked with debt, which like, look, a lot of business people do, right? Like, I'm not trying to necessarily call him out on that, but the point is, when you have these problems and you also have a top secret security clearance in the White House.
And you are also married to the president's daughter.
Yeah. Therein lies some conflict.
There may be a chance.
Yeah.
You could be subjected to.
We've got a recipe for some serious conflict brewing. So 4 countries have looked at Jared Kushner and looked at his problems, his financial issues, his lack of governmental experience, and also the fact that, as you said, his political influence is very, very valuable. So the United Arab Emirates, Mexico, Israel, and China have all looked at his problems and said, like, we could maybe exploit that for our own personal gain.
Those are just the ones that we know.
Those are the ones we know about.
Of.
That's absolutely right.
It's really frightening to think also because this problem extends beyond Kushner. When you look at Ivanka herself.
That's the thing.
Donald Trump himself. It's exactly as Blumenthal said, multiple people suffering from the same ills.
Right. Like we have numerous members of the White House who have these temporary security clearances, right? Multiple. And some of them are, they're like figuring it out now, which great timing. Over a year after you've been in the office, now's a great time to figure it out.
Great time.
Great time. But put all that aside, Donald Trump himself has a problem. Like, Donald Trump is the one who could easily be manipulated, easily be screwed around with. And that leads to another part of the story I wanted to mention. We learned yesterday that Robert Mueller is not, I mean, look, he's got a lot on his plate, right? But it's not so much about the collusion. It's not so much about the treason. It's not so much about any of that as it is about Donald Trump and his business dealings. And people who know Donald Trump and have known him for a long time, I've said this before, right? Like the DC media, I don't think has still really figured out how to report on Donald Trump. Because it is a weird thing, right, that he is actually the president of the United States, which I still, like, look at the TV and just go, God, I can't believe we're still
I think
here.
they should take a hint from the kids.
They should take a hint from the kids. They should absolutely take a hint from the kids.
This is how we should be covering Donald Trump.
And the people who really know Donald Trump best are the people who covered not D.C. media and politics, but those who covered New York media. Because Donald Trump is purely a creation of the New York media. And he understood early on, there is no such thing as bad press. He just wants to get his name in the papers, and that's it, right? That's it. And so you go back to his real estate holdings, his financial holdings, and all these problems that he's had over the years. And yeah, it's finally going to catch up with him now that he's in the White House. Like, that's what Robert Mueller is looking at. Donald Trump knows how to move money around. Like, we know that about him. So, what's going to finally get Donald Trump? Not his utter stupidity on, the people that he surrounded himself with, but it really could just be his business dealings. And that's what Robert Mueller is going to take a look at. His business dealings with Russia, his moving money around in shady ways, which we know he has a history of. It's just going to get shadier and shadier. I don't know when the Mueller bomb is going to finally drop. Could take some time. Probably will. But that's okay. It's not like irreparable damage is being done to the country in the meantime. Oh, wait. It absolutely is.
It's so dark. We live in dark times.
We live in hell. We live in hell. Every single morning I wake up and I go, well, here we are, another day in hell. Every day. Every day. It's unbelievable, Ray.
It is unbelievable. Something I wanted to talk about that we have speculated is that Donald Trump is going to run in 2020 because, of course, Donald Trump is going to run.
Of course he's going to run in 2020. I understand that we're living in a period of time where politics doesn't make any sense anymore, right? Like there are people who've covered politics their whole lives, and it's sort of a script to how some of this stuff goes. Script is out the window.
Out the window. But I do have a question. Do you think that the next presidential election will essentially be a replay of 2016? Will the media give Donald Trump unlimited coverage, free advertising, a gazillion town halls? Do you think that we'll make the same mistake again?
Yes.
I think so too.
100%.
Again, we live in hell.
But I will say this. I used to be of the mind that Donald Trump's going to be a president for 8 years. He's going to be a two-term president, full stop, and that's it. And I've kind of wavered on that a little bit. I mean, obviously this depends on a lot of different factors, right? Like what the Democrats end up doing and who they elect, or who they nominate, I should say. But I just think that, like, there were a lot of people who assumed that Donald Trump would become more presidential, and he didn't.
Which is a ridiculous assumption. I'm sorry. If you had that argument, there's some kind of dissonance in your thought pattern.
I agree with that. Here's what I would say. I'm not one of these people that says, like, oh, we should reach out to Trump voters and figure out how they think. But, like, I just happen to know a lot of Trump voters. I have a lot of Trump voters in my life, for better or worse. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad.
Oh, hi, Mom. Hi, Dad.
Listen, they're not watching.
Not my mom and dad.
They're not watching. But I understand part of why they would have voted for Donald Trump, right? Like, I understand that. And I even said I was way out ahead of the game. I said on air, Donald Trump's going to be the Republican nominee.
Yep. I called it when he gave that very first speech.
Yeah.
I said he was going to be the president.
Admittedly, I didn't think he was going to win the presidency. I really didn't.
I did.
But I wasn't completely shocked and stunned when he did. And so I understand why you might have thought, okay, this guy is playing a character. He's got to get these people riled up. He's got to get these votes. And then when he gets into office, he's a businessman. He knows how to run things. He'll tighten up. And here we are, and it just clearly hasn't happened. And I think a lot of those people, one of my friends who's a farmer said, I'm voting for Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton hasn't told me anything that I can use. She hasn't spoken to me at all, and Donald Trump has. And that, I mean, look, I don't want to debate this too much, but, like, when we talk about Donald Trump and the way he ran his campaign, when he spoke at the Republican National Convention, I looked at him and I just go, wow, he's giving them something to vote for.
Yes.
He's giving them ideas, and he's saying, I will do this, and they are concrete ideas, and people will go vote for them. Now, understanding who he is, none of those have happened, but we didn't get a lot of that out of our nominee, if you're a Democrat.
You know, we didn't, and I'm not here for Hillary bashing or whatever, and I'm not here to relive the 2016 election.
Neither am I.
But I will say one thing that Hillary Clinton did try to make as, you know, a strong point about was guns.
Yeah.
She was taking a stance on guns back in 2016.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's vastly underrated when we look back at her candidacy, is that we say she had nothing that she stood for. There was nothing groundbreaking. But for me, that was groundbreaking because at that period in 2015 and 2016, not many politicians were speaking out against the NRA.
No, it's true. And here we are now. We have this sort of moment where, guns are the issue.
They've been the issue for a long time. We've just let politicians sweep it away.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but, like, it hasn't been a priority for voters.
Sure.
It just hasn't. I mean, it has come in waves.
No, I agree.
Right.
And I think that
we haven't sustained our anger and demand for action.
For sure.
At all.
And I think that it is something that has reached a critical mass now, as we talked about yesterday, because this is Generation Columbine. These kids that are graduating right now and who will be of age to vote in this next election, including the midterms, some of them, they were born in or around the year when Columbine happened.
Yep.
They don't know a time without the internet. They don't know a time without mass shootings in schools. This is just what they know. And this is very, very top of the mind for these kids. And it's not going to go away the same way that it may for people, you know, your age or older, because you didn't grow up with that. It wasn't a constant source of fear. By
the way, on that note, a new Quinnipiac University national poll conducted after the mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, shows that 51% of voters say the NRA supports policies that are bad for the United States. Bad for the United States. Now, how has that progressed? Back in October, they did a similar poll that found that 47% thought that the NRA supported bad policies. That was the highest it had ever been at that time. So we are now, for the very first time, according to this Quinnipiac poll, the majority of voters think that the NRA is bad for America. And this is like, if you have a candidate that's going to go out there now and say, the NRA is bad, I'm anti-NRA, I'm anti-guns, I'm certainly assault weapons.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a losing thing.
It's not a losing thing. And that was a question that you posed yesterday as well. It was like, can politicians run now on an anti-NRA platform and still win? And I think yes.
We can now.
Yes.
3 years ago, maybe not.
No.
In fact, definitely not. We saw what happened with Tom Perriello.
Yep.
It just wasn't going to happen. Anyway. One final thing I want to get into is Hope Hicks. Because she did meet in front of the House Intelligence Committee. Adam Schiff continued to do his work there. He met with Hope Hicks, and a couple of clips from him. The first one where he talks about how she answered the questions, what she did.
Initially, it was made clear to us that the White House had given Ms. Hicks the same instructions that were given to Steve Bannon, and that is not to answer any questions pertaining to the transition or to her time in the administration.
And he referenced Steve Bannon there. Let's hear more from Adam Schiff.
This is a breathtakingly broad claim of privilege that I don't think any court would sustain, and I think the White House knows that.
So that's what we were talking about earlier, right? Whether or not this could actually be a thing that they can hold up. And I think the answer is pretty clearly no. Pretty clearly no. ABC or NBC News had a report yesterday, because I'm not one of these people that thinks that the Russians are solely to blame for the loss in 2016 for Democrats. I think they certainly played a role, and I think their influence was certainly a thing. But I also just think that, like, Democrats could have run a better campaign.
Agree. And also, let's not downplay the fact that America has a huge problem with race. And this largely was a reactionary campaign to Obama.
Yes.
Our first African-American president.
Yes.
And yes.
And so it turns out, according to NBC, 7 different states had their rolls, their voter rolls, compromised by the Russians. Not straight up and down, folks. Alaska, Arizona, California, Florida, Illinois, Texas, and Wisconsin. 3 different senior intelligence officials told NBC News that they believed that those states were compromised. Now, that's a lot.
That's a lot.
And that's a big deal. And, you know, the bigger issue is here we are over a year and a half or whatever since the election, and nothing's been done.
The president won't even admit that this happened.
He won't even admit. And so, like, we have the midterms coming up. We are still vulnerable.
With multiple intelligence reports indicating that Russia is trying to pull the same thing and largely succeeding.
Yeah.
Because we are doing nothing about it.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, we'll have to wait until November to see what's going to happen, right, and how this plays out. But the other interesting part about this is the Donald Trump war on the intelligence community, which he has made very, very public, and allegations of deep state, and talks about what a sloppy job they've done, and that they're out to get him. Even yesterday, tweeting, all caps, witch hunt. Right? Like, this is all now coming back to bite him in the ass, because the intelligence community, they know a lot more than he does. And like, he just hasn't informed himself by design. He just doesn't, it's not something he prioritizes, but like, they are going to come out and they're going to get this information out one way or the other. They've been trying to give it to the president. He just doesn't read his daily briefings. He doesn't care.
He doesn't care. If it's not on Fox News, it's not reaching him.
The U.S. intelligence community developed substantial evidence that state websites or voter registration systems in 7 different states were compromised by Russian-backed covert operations prior to the 2016 elections, but they never told the states involved. Top secret intelligence, I'm reading directly from the NBC News report by Cynthia McFadden. Top secret intelligence requested by President Barack Obama in his last weeks in office identified 7 states where analysts synthesizing months of work had reason to believe that Russian operatives had compromised state websites or databases. So look, again, shame on Donald Trump for not doing anything, but also we have to look back and wonder how much differently this story could have played out if Barack Obama and his administration had actually come out and said something and done something about this.
It's a huge question that will loom over Obama's presidency forever.
I know we as progressives and liberals hate to criticize Barack Obama, but looks like a miss to me. That looks like a bad job by Barack Obama.
Agree.
All that being said, he's not the president anymore, and we have a president who could do something, and yet he does not. So I'm not laying it squarely at his feet, but also come on.
No, I don't think that any one person is to blame for this. I think that it's multiple missteps by many people.
Yeah. A systematic failure, if
yes.
you will. So how are we looking in the midterms, which are coming up here this November? Well, we should get a report on that from Simone Pathe. She's senior politics reporter for Roll Call. She's going to be joining us in studio here in the next segment, so stay tuned for that. Not only an update on the midterms, but we'll find out the fate of little Bob Corker.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Stay tuned. We'll have an update on that here in just a moment here on the Bill Press Show. My name is Peter Ogburn, sitting in for Bill today. We'll be right back.
Download our podcast, search for The Bill Press Show on iTunes, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Bill Press Show.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation letter.
You're resigning.
Why? Because you're constantly ignoring me. You're half as active as you used to be, and you eat stuff like this. You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
I forgot. I'll do better. Please, don't quit on me.
Okay, but remember, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Adventure can be found anywhere, but the best place to start is in the forest.
I spy something beginning with S.
Snow?
No.
Snow-covered trees?
Nothing to do with snow.
Head outside to discover incredible animals and beautiful plants that come together to create an unforgettable adventure.
Wow.
So grab your loved ones.
Don't even.
And explore a world of possibilities.
Come on, this way.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find the closest forest or park to you.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the agony of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Bill's commentary, the best clips from the show, all in one place. YouTube.com/The Bill Press Show.
It is the Bill Press Show. Hi, everybody. My name is Peter Ogburn, sitting in for Bill Press. I didn't know I was going to be hosting today either. I had no idea. I know a lot of you were surprised. Frankly, none of you were more surprised than I am. Bill came in this morning, had no voice, and it's just kind of hard to do radio and TV when you don't have a voice. So we sprung into action. I'm sitting here. Luckily, I booked only the best guest who could come in and help me through the show. Simone Pathe from Roll Call is here, senior politics reporter. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. It's a pleasant surprise to see you in the anchor chair.
It's a pleasant surprise for me, too. I had no idea, but here we are. Gosh, we were just talking about the 2018 midterms. They're going to be here before we know it, right?
They're basically here.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the end of February, which, God, that was fast. And before we know it, it's going to be full-on voting season. I want to ask you, first of all, you have a story about Bob Corker. Because Bob Corker sort of infamously said he wasn't going to run. Then we started hearing rumblings that, maybe he's having second thoughts about this. He might get back into the race. But according to you,
he's not actually.
Okay, yeah. He's officially not going to run.
So this was a fun little song and dance that we went through for a couple weeks. And you're right. He had come out last fall and said, hey, I don't want to be a long-term senator. I'm a citizen legislator, whatever that means. So I'm getting out of here after 2 terms, which opened the doors immediately to Marsha Blackburn getting in the race. She has been a super aggressive fundraiser. She's pretty conservative, well-known across the state, big Trump supporter. So she's got a lot going for her in a Republican state that supported Trump by a pretty wide margin. But then when Corker started to backtrack his retirement announcement, you could see the Blackburn folks getting a little bit nervous. They went as far as to call the people who are trying to get Corker back into the race sexist pigs, angry old men who somehow resented Blackburn or questioned her general election viability. There is an argument out there, that she is way too conservative for a general election against a fairly conservative, moderate Democrat, of the former governor of Tennessee, that could pose a problem for Republicans. They pushed out a lot of polling showing that she would defeat Corker handily in the primary. So no one really knows what Corker's thinking was, although it's hard to see all the public polling. Hard to see that he would have had a path to victory in the primary. Right.
So that's sort of, to me, that race is kind of fascinating because I think you're seeing more and more Democrats feeling empowered in states like Tennessee, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And Marsha Blackburn is as conservative gets. And you mentioned Donald Trump did very, very well in Tennessee. The Democratic candidate, the former governor, Phil Bredesen. I've seen Democrats run former politicians, right? Like Evan Bayh last go around, Ted Strickland.
Yeah.
Didn't work out so well.
It often doesn't. Yeah.
Right. So I know now is a different time, right? Like Democrats, like I said, they're feeling empowered, they're feeling emboldened, but like, how's it shaping up? Let me put it that way. How's it shaping up down there?
So Democrats are very aware of, I'll call it the Ted Strickland problem, right? Where you had a former politician who actually moved to D.C. He worked for the Center for American Progress and then went back to Ohio to run for Senate last year against Rob Portman. Not a good
Didn't work out so well. Yeah.
For a liberal think tank and then run for Senate. The argument that they're pushing now is that Bredesen didn't do that. He didn't move to D.C. He's been back there. He was a popular governor. He theoretically has name ID. So they're very much clinging to the fact that he is still of Tennessee and he didn't become some sort of D.C. lobbyist.
Yeah.
The way, Evan Bayh, you could argue that he certainly did. Evan Bayh was doing what was best for Evan Bayh.
Exactly. Exactly. I think that's a fair point, though. I really do think that's a fair point, right?
You can say there's a difference.
Yeah. If you're going to be a public servant to the state that you want to run in, I think that Evan Bayh and Ted Strickland did it the wrong way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think there's something to be said that maybe Bredesen has a little bit of a better chance because of that. He's a little bit older, so there's a question of, what kind of excitement is he going to demand on the campaign trail? He's got a lot of money. which never really hurts.
Doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt.
So that could help as well. You're right. A lot of Democrats were energized after Alabama, of course.
Yeah.
And most people recognize at their core that that was a very unique situation.
To say the least.
But it hasn't stopped Democrats from thinking that tactically they can learn from that Senate race and maybe deploy some of the same strategy, the same messaging, the same turnout operation in some of these other Southern races.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who is from the South, I obsess over this stuff, right? Because like there are some pockets of the South where Democrats just do well, and you know it's a balancing act. Like you look at someone like Joe Manchin, who is essentially a Republican, right? And then you look at there are other pockets of the South where there are out and out, essentially socialists, right, who do well. Yeah. Statewide is a different issue, but like there are pockets where you could do okay. And I just think the excitement that is following Democratic candidates right now, this could be a very unique midterm year. I mean, you not only do you have the wave, but then you also just have a lot of politicians finding their voice. So are there any other big ticket races in the South that we should be keeping our eyes on?
So there's Texas, of course.
Oh, yes.
Most people are still admitting that that's a reach for Democrats, but you can't ignore that Beto O'Rourke has been a really strong fundraiser. He's outraised Ted Cruz, I think, 2 non-consecutive quarters at this point, which is fairly impressive.
The last quarter that I saw, I think he raised like $1.5 million more than Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
Which is shocking.
And hearing from people on the ground, former roll call reporter Abby Livingston has been out in Texas this past week covering primaries, and she's been talking about just the energy that she has seen on the ground that she hasn't seen before, whether it's for O'Rourke or just for congressional candidates in general. So the same sort of enthusiasm that we're seeing around the country, I think, has also affected Texas. Whether that's enough in 2018, maybe not.
I mean, I can't think of a more prized scalp for Democrats to get their hands on than Ted Cruz.
That would be huge for the
That
party.
would be a big deal.
It would be a major upset.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of Republicans would be fine with it. A lot of Republican senators would have no problem with it either.
They wouldn't mind. Say goodbye.
But the excitement factor.
Yeah.
The excitement factor. It's not just about money. It's about excitement. And I think there are a lot of people who maybe sat out the election in 2016 and just said, oh, God, what did I do?
Yeah. And there are some other Southern races that are a little bit less major races, to your point, in your native South Carolina, for example, right? The Charleston race.
Yes.
There's a Democrat running there.
Yeah.
He's raised some decent money. I think he said that he would not support Nancy Pelosi, like clearly staking out a position there that he thinks will get him further in a general election.
Yeah.
There's the South Carolina 5 seed where Archie Parnell ran in a special election last year.
And almost won.
And
he's essentially a Bernie Sanders type Democrat. Like he came out and was very strong.
He's got an interesting profile. He's a former Goldman Sachs guy, which is sort of an odd fit for that district. And I think had a little trouble connecting, especially with African American voters at the outset. But round 2, he could come out stronger. You're right. He did come in all those special elections the closest to actually defeating a Republican. I think part of that was because it was such a low-profile race.
Yeah.
It was the same day as Georgia 6. Like, people just didn't pay attention, and therefore Republican turnout was lower.
Oh, God,
But that's not to negate at all that there is certainly enthusiasm behind him this year.
So, you mentioned something that I want to hit on for a second. Being against Nancy Pelosi. Because there are more and more Democrats who are saying, like, yes, I'm going to run, and no, I don't support Nancy Pelosi. And I think a lot of this came from, you just mentioned the Georgia 6 race, the John Ossoff race.
Right.
They really tried to make it about, this is another vote for Nancy Pelosi.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What's the future of Nancy Pelosi in the party, and what sort of impact is she going to play in these upcoming midterms?
Yeah, well, there is no question that Republicans are going to use her for all she's worth. I mean, at the beginning of the cycle, you had Congressional Leadership Fund, which is the major Republican super PAC on the House Republican side, committing to spending hundreds of millions of dollars using her. And you saw that in Georgia. You're seeing that now in the special election in Pennsylvania's 18th district, which it's not necessarily a great chance for Democrats, just given the fundamentals of the district. But Republicans are clearly worried. They're spending money there. And the constant attack is tying Conor Lamb, the Democratic nominee, to Nancy Pelosi. Lamb even came out earlier this week with an ad of his own saying, hey, wait, I said I'm not going to support her.
Not a fan. Not a fan. It's just remarkable to me that Democrats are having to come out and say, like, nah, we're not such a big fan of essentially like the leader of the party in the House.
Yeah, there's a recognition, I think, among candidates, maybe for one of the first times at sort of the national level across the board, that she is pretty toxic when it comes to electoral politics. Yes, she raises a lot of money, and that is great for these candidates to the extent it trickles down to them. You can argue, her merits as a legislator and a negotiator, that's all great. But when it comes to elections, when voters are just seeing two candidates and two messages and they're being tied to this wealthy woman from San Francisco, that's kind of a drag in South Carolina.
Totally. No, I mean, look, I get it. And I'm pretty quick to defend Nancy Pelosi and the work that she's done. I think that what we now know as Obamacare probably should be called Pelosi Care, because she had a bigger hand in getting it done than literally anybody else. She made it happen.
Yeah.
All that being said, might be time to just step aside, let some new blood in, and lead the party.
Yeah. Yeah.
And look, that's not because she's done a bad job. It's just kind of like, you've been there long enough. People don't like Congress. It might just be time.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of members of the caucus calling for that. Even, after the 2016 elections, if you remember, you saw that sort of core group of rabble-rousers in the House, some of the younger members, the Tim Ryans of the world, the Seth Moultons, saying hey, we need new leadership if we're gonna succeed electorally. And it wasn't at all about her leadership in the House that they were contesting.
Right.
I mean, her success or not. It was really about just sort of the face of the party electorally going forward.
I want to ask you about your piece that you have up at rollcall.com, rollcall.com. By the way, you can follow Simone on Twitter at sfpathe, P-A-T-H-E, and read her good work at rollcall.com. Wealth of Congress. 14 vulnerable incumbents are at least worth $1 million. You've got a whole list of the ones that are here. Some familiar names here if you pay attention to this show. Claire McCaskill, for sure. Joe Manchin. Josh Gottheimer. We talked about the money factor, right? How is that going to play? You point out that only one of them has spent money on their own campaign.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're funding or self-funding or anything like that. But when you look, I'm trying to figure out how to put this delicately. But when you look at where we are,
right,
with politics, right? I think that a lot of people are buying into the stereotype of the fat cat politician who's gotten high on the hog while being in office. And you could point to these people and say, well, yeah, they are. They made a lot of money. How is that going to play a factor in their re-election bids?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would encourage folks to go to Roll Call, a little plug here, and check out the entire index of the wealth of Congress.
Rollcall.com, folks.
Rollcall.com.
Check it out.
Our fabulous researcher, Paul Fontello, crunched all of these numbers himself, one person. That's an enormous accomplishment.
Wow.
So shout out to Paul. Anyway, yeah.
As someone who's as terrible at math as I am, that gave me such anxiety to just hear those words come out of your mouth, Simone.
Me too. I know. And what's interesting, so the way that we did our vulnerable list here is we looked at all of the members who are in seats that are toss-up or likely Republican, likely Democratic, according to Nathan Gonzalez's ratings. And we found all of those members on the list of all members of Congress who are worth over $1 million. So these folks are very rich, but they do not in any way necessarily represent how rich the rest of Congress is. If you go through that list, I mean, some of them are leaving, like Darrell Issa is always the most.
He's always the most. He's always the richest, right? He's still
leaving.
The richest.
He is the richest. Okay. But now you've got Gianforte in the mix, who I think is the second richest. Freeling Heinz
even after all of his court fees?
Even after all those bills.
Yeah.
He is up there. So anyway, all of that is to say is that these people are rich. Someone like Colin Peterson, I think, is the last person on the list, which kind of surprised me. He's a conservative, Minnesota Democrat, never really run super aggressive campaigns up in the northern part of the state. Like, just he hasn't really faced much competition. And he's worth money, but like not at all what most of these really super wealthy members of Congress are.
Right. Right.
That being said, someone like McCaskill, who is the most vulnerable, wealthy member of Congress on our list, there's no question that Republicans are going to try to smear her as a D.C. insider with lots of money. I think lots of the money comes from her husband, for example. So they're going to use that to create a certain narrative. And as you said, it's not necessarily about these people using their own money to buy their electoral seats, which of course has happened in many places. You know, family member funds a super PAC or whatever. It's about the persona of the person. And if you have a bank account that is worth 9 figures, it's a lot easier to create the narrative that this person is out for themselves. They don't represent you.
Yeah. Okay, so at the top of your list, Claire McCaskill, $26.9 million. She's a little vulnerable.
She is vulnerable.
She's a little vulnerable.
Yes. And if you recall her past election, I don't want to say she got a free pass. She did
a
good job, but...
I will. She got a free pass. She was going to lose that race.
It was a unique situation.
She was going to lose that race. And then we remember Todd Atkin which, by the way, if Todd Atkin had made that statement in today's political climate, he'd probably be senator.
Yeah.
He'd probably be senator. Like, it wouldn't even matter.
Right.
Yeah, it would be nothing. Like, that's... Oh, forget it. I'm not going to dwell on the past. But, there's a very... I mean, Missouri has a really, really interesting political climate going on right now. I mean, their governor, they essentially don't have a governor right now.
Right.
He was arrested.
Right.
Charged with a felony. For invasion of privacy because he was sharing a photo of a woman he was having an affair with, a nude photo of a woman he was having an affair with. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious, like, what sort of impact that would have on McCaskill's midterm race. I mean, look, I'm not saying she's a lucky politician, but boy, the luck certainly doesn't hurt her.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to watch on the Republican side. So gearing up to this race, everyone thought it was going to be Claire McCaskill versus Ann Wagner, which would be really interesting because McCaskill had never faced a female opponent before, and that kind of takes some issues off the table, right?
Fair, yeah.
But the party, for whatever reason, signaled to Wagner that they didn't actually want her to run, and so now they have the Attorney General, Josh Hawley, who has attracted some support from like the Bannon crowd and the Club for Growth, but also so-called establishment Republicans here in D.C., but he hasn't raised a lot of money. He hasn't been doing a lot of campaigning or active fundraising. So some Republicans are concerned that maybe he might not live up to expectations, but he's a young face. Yeah. He's got support from many different corners of the Republican Party. Certainly a really tough challenger for McCaskill.
Reminds me a lot of the governor. Young face, lots of support from different corners of the party. Yeah.
Yes. So you're going to see some attacks.
I'm not writing her ads. I'm just saying.
I'm sure that's going to come up. And we already had what she would call a Todd Atkin moment. If you recall, a couple weeks ago, came out that Hawley had said something basically equating like this sexual liberation movement to, I don't know. It was a weirdly phrased.
Yeah. So as we talk about the midterms, what are the chances? What is it going to look like for a Democratic takeover of the House and the Senate? I think Claire McCaskill is a big key to keeping that seat, right. and I think there are a couple others that are going to be tough for Democrats. But can they actually flip both?
I don't think so. Yeah. I think it's likely that they flip one or the other. I think, just looking at the numbers, the chances are probably still a little bit better in the House. They have to pick up 24 seats, which is a pretty tall order.
Sure.
There are 23 Republicans sitting in House districts that Clinton won, so that's sort of your first tier of natural targets, and then some other people that they're hoping to catch asleep at the wheel. The Senate level, the numbers are pretty daunting. They have to keep all of those 10 seats that Donald Trump won, those states. That in itself is huge. You're talking about McCaskill, Manchin, Heitkamp, Donnelly, people who are pretty conservative, but in pretty conservative states.
Right.
And then you have to pick up seats. So that looks like it could be a Nevada, an Arizona, possibly a Tennessee or a Texas. But like for all of those things to go right, it creates sort of a perfect storm opportunity. And to my point that they're either going to pick up one or the other. If they do pick up one, they're sort of different narratives, right? Like if they're going to pick up the Senate, they have to play to this more conservative red state Democratic mantra, whereas picking up the House sort of plays to a more liberal suburban narrative. So it depends how the party's able to structure its narrative in a lot of these states.
Well, I mean, the Democrats actually have to get it together and like work on them. That alone is the most daunting task. It's a tall order, I think.
It is.
I think more likely they pick up the House. They flip the House.
Yeah.
Speaking of the House, Paul Ryan is up against a formidable opponent in Iron Stash.
Yes.
Randy Bryce. He's been here. He's sat right there. I have to tell you, the mustache in person is just as nice as you think it would be.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's a very impressive stash. I got to be honest. Does Paul Ryan does he have a shot of going down? I mean, could he actually lose this race?
I think it's pretty tough to see him losing.
Yeah.
But, even if it requires him to spend money, to spend a little extra time back home that he wouldn't spend around the country fundraising or campaigning for other members, that's notable.
Yeah. I agree, actually. Like, I think, God, I would love to see, I like Iron Stash a lot. Mostly because I'd love to just say, Congressman Iron Stash. But like, who knows these days, right? Like, who even knows? It could totally happen.
Yeah, and he hasn't even said that he's running for re-election, which
right.
is, could be an open question. He's got a pretty tough and not so fun job right now. So.
There was a brief period of time not so long ago that we weren't sure if he was going to run at all.
Mm-hmm.
And is that gone? Do we feel like he's going to run?
So I think what he said is that he always makes the decision sometime later in the spring after a conversation with his family.
Seems to be cutting a little close.
It's a little close.
Right?
It's a little close.
Okay.
Democrats are really banking on him just as sort of a boogeyman, the same way that Republicans are excited about Pelosi. And
Fair.
They have polling that in a lot of these House districts that they're contesting, Ryan is actually more unpopular than Donald Trump. So I think you're going to see in some districts, Democrats aren't going to talk about Trump at all. It's going to be about Ryan.
Ryan. Boy, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to ask you about, this is sort of a curveball, but yesterday we learned that Donald Trump has picked his campaign manager for 2020. So for those of you who are watching and listening who thought that, he was just going to do one term and get out, doesn't look like that's going to happen. He has picked a man by the name of Brad Parscale. What do we know about him? We've only got about a minute left, but what do we know about him? Anything?
I honestly don't know a whole lot.
I don't know much about him at all. But like the fact that Donald Trump is signaling now that he's going to run, I think is news.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you can't ignore the fact that 2018 will impact 2020. If Democrats pick up a huge number of seats and get in power and try to pass a lot of progressive agenda, 2020 could conceively be harder, right? Because there's a backlash factor. If they don't pick up seats, Trump is maybe in more danger in 2020.
I shared this story with a friend of mine yesterday who's one of those people who believes that Donald Trump is not going to run for a second term. And he just wrote back to me and goes, well, he could still change his mind. So, like, that's also true.
Anything is possible.
Anything is possible. God. Simone Pathe, she is the senior politics reporter for Roll Call. Follow her on Twitter at SFPathe and read her good work at rollcall.com. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. My name is Peter Ogburn, sitting in for Bill Press today. We're going to take a very, very quick break. We'll be right back.
This is the Bill Press Show.
I wanted to find a bank with a purpose. I wanted to find a place that would take my money and not use it to cause the financial crisis, but to fix the financial crisis and to help end income inequality.
The people that we employ are usually clients right off the streets. They don't have an account, but Amalgamated is willing to get that started for them.
Their reputation of supporting the working man, I think, speaks for itself. This is a bank that cares for their customers, and I appreciate that.
We were able to access a construction loan through the bank's programs, and that loan has helped us house 28 families in the community.
Amalgamated is a bank that was started for and about working people.
Many of our customers have a deep commitment to advocating for social and economic justice. We share that commitment, and we're not afraid to stand up and say that we need to change some of the way that the country does business.
giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
It is The Bill Press Show. My name is not Bill Press. My name is Peter Ogburn. I didn't know I was going to be hosting the show today, and here I am. Bill came in studio, and he had sort of a scratchy voice, and we asked him, how you doing? And he started trying to use sign language to talk to us. So we figured it was pretty bad.
That's not great for the radio.
That's not great.
It's Bill. It's just one of his all-night raves.
Yeah.
As usual.
He came in with a pacifier in his mouth.
That's it.
Yeah. So luckily, thankfully, we have some great guests who are joining us for the entire show today. Former host of the show, future host of the show, Evan McMorris Santoro from Vice News. You can catch Vice News weeknights at 7:30 p.m. on HBO. Good to see you, man.
I'm just up from last night still.
You were at the same rate as Bill?
I'm surprised Bill went down. Like, I mean, he was running the whole show. This guy brings party drugs like you would not believe.
Well, we know that. We've worked with him long enough.
That old California Democratic Party chair stuff. That's the good stuff.
So
anyway, I'm out of my mind. What's going on?
So we're here. We're going to be hosting the show for this hour without Bill. And Bill, we hope you get your voice back soon. I want to play a couple of clips. This story is kind of fascinating to me. The mayor of Denver is in a little bit of hot water. By a little bit of hot water, I mean he's in a lot of hot water. Because it turns out he has been sexually harassing female cops. One female cop in particular, her name is Leslie Branch Wise. She came forward yesterday, and she talked about the conversations that she had with the mayor of Denver, Colorado. It's a man by the name of Michael Hancock. By all accounts, has done a good job in Denver up until this point, and she actually came out and spoke about it yesterday.
There were times that he said I looked sexy and that I would make it hard for him to concentrate.
So she's a former member of his security team. Apparently, there are others. Apparently, this happened in 2012, and I don't want to say to his credit, but he came out and spoke about this yesterday.
This was a mistake. I'm human. I make mistakes. I was too familiar. I was too casual. And those text exchanges were inappropriate and unprofessional.
Ray Rogers is in there running the board, rolling her eyes. I don't disagree with you.
I'm sorry. His adjective choice of familiar and casual? No.
Yeah.
If you ever need any more justification for this whole Me Too movement, like whether or not this is a prevalent thing in society, this man was flirting with the women around him who are carrying guns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's privilege.
Yeah, that's privilege. That is
you obviously
male
don't
privilege.
have any fear at all.
Yeah.
If you're like, there's a woman around me who's trained to
kill.
Use a gun.
She's trained to kill.
And she's carrying a gun.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna throw a little hey
Angel. Yeah.
How's it looking?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I mean, it'll be fascinating to see if he survives this politically.
What's this guy's name?
His name is Michael Hancock. Michael Hancock.
I really feel like I interviewed him recently at the mayor's conference.
Really?
About I think I did a story about mayors and the White House and some of their difficulties.
That's the guy.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I will say I went unhit on.
Okay, fair. Fair.
But yeah, look, I don't know if you can survive this stuff, not survive this stuff. I think it's pretty clear at this point that this stuff is not tolerated any longer.
Yeah, no, I mean the fact that she came out and like put her name on it and talked about it and said what he had put in those texts, and that he actually had to come out and address it, I think is a big deal. Again, whether or not he survives it, we will see.
You know, we've actually seen like a rash of this with mayors and their security details.
Yeah,
the mayor of Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah.
That was a woman, and
Yeah.
she had a consensual affair with. It's a very different situation, obviously.
Yeah.
But I guess, I mean,
you grow very close to the people who are like in charge of your life.
You get familiar with them,
I guess. It's Peter Ogburn and Evan McMorris Santoro. We're going to be filling in for this next hour. Stay tuned. Very, very quick break.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is the Bill Press Show.
Yes, indeed, it is the Bill Press Show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I am Peter Ogburn, sitting in for Bill Press today. Bill came in, tried to do the show, but we sent him home before he cracked the mic because he just didn't have much of a voice, and that's just one of those things you're going to have if you're going to do a radio show. So here I am filling in for Bill. Ray Rogers is running the board. It takes a village, folks.
Good morning. A small village indeed.
It takes a small village. We all swept into action and made it happen. But luckily, we have some very, very smart people to help us carry this last hour out. Evan McMorris Santoro, correspondent for Vice News, is here with us for the hour.
Hello.
Good to see you, man.
I have a voice.
You have a voice.
This is the sound of it.
This is... I have a semblance of a voice.
I actually have kind of a cold. So, like, I have a raspy voice. There's something going on where everybody has been sick, I think, since, like, December. I've been sick since, like, December 23rd.
Yeah, fair.
Should I go to a doctor?
Well, it's like...
Probably. Will I?
Well,
No.
it's like one day it's 86 degrees. Last week it was 86 degrees.
That's right.
And then the next day it's 30 degrees.
That's right. Plants don't know what to do.
No.
I don't know what to do. It's confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
That's right.
Ray, you haven't been touched by any illness. You're fine.
No, I generally don't get sick.
Have you ever? I never, ever get sick.
I hardly
except for when,
ever get
I
sick.
died last year. But other than that...
That was a big one. That made up for a
I think that
lifetime
made up for a
of
lot of
non-sickness.
other missed illnesses.
That's right. That's right. You racked it up.
I think it finally caught up with me.
You saved it up.
God, we know kind of the day before where we want to go and talk about the show, but like just in the days of these news cycles, right? Whether you're Republican or Democrat or wherever you stand on these issues, like it's just an onslaught of news constantly. And I think a lot of people are still getting situated with that. But I want to play you a quick clip because today is the day that Billy Graham is going to be lying in state. And so he's here in town. His body is here in town, and Congress is not going to be working.
Mm-hmm.
They are not going to be holding any votes. In fact, Bill Clinton actually talked about Billy Graham yesterday. I want to play this clip.
Those of us who are Christians believe in a God of second chances, and the politicians need those more than anybody else. So you got to cut him a little slack.
By the way, if anybody believes in second chances,
you got to give him credit for that. He's just like, Bill.
Just, put it out there, Bill.
Those of us who are politicians need second chances.
Yeah.
Those of us who are politicians named Bill Clinton need like 12th or 15th chances.
Hypothetically speaking. If there were to be a second chance, I certainly deserve one.
My favorite thing that Billy Graham had was a bag of chances. And I would dip in that bag and take chances out.
Oh, my gosh. The man of hidden talents.
Is this going out? Are we on air?
We're on air.
Okay,
I think we're live.
Anyway.
So here's what's fascinating about this. He is the fourth private citizen to lie in state.
Mm-hmm.
The last person who was lying in state was Rosa Parks in 2005. Before that, it was Ronald Reagan who laid in state. Now, here's the interesting part of all this. Congress, they're not getting any work done.
Mm-hmm.
No work whatsoever. They did not shut down when Rosa Parks laid in state. They did not shut down when Ronald Reagan laid in state. And they are whispering amongst themselves that they had to shut down the government, or not shut down the government, but stop business and stop working because maybe finally they'll get a little bit more of a break on the whole gun thing. They don't have to do anything on the gun thing because, God, they can't do any work when Billy Graham is lying in state.
We are in an election year, and in an election year, the tendency of politicians is to not do anything. This is the time in their careers when they're told by all their advisors that the worst thing you can do right now is something.
Yeah.
That, like, let's just start running for office. Let's just start talking about apple pie and fireworks and whatever else that people like, and let's not do anything that someone could then use against us. And obviously the gun issue is one of those issues where there's a lot of confusion among Republicans about what exactly they are supposed to do right now. The polls are shifting dramatically, rapidly towards the idea of wanting some sort of gun safety legislation, while the NRA is still very strongly digging in its heels. And the concern for Republicans, of course, is primary season.
Yeah.
But they also have the general election to worry about, too, because it's not a year that looks really good for them. So if you're them, you're like, okay, well, if I move away from the NRA, that could hurt me in the primary. If I move closer to it could hurt me in the general. maybe we should just not do anything? Right. So, I mean, it really just depends on what voters are going to do with this information at the end of the year.
It's kind of fascinating, right? Like last year, which was not an election year, didn't get much done then either.
Yeah, this is not exactly the salad days of congressional action the past few years.
Right.
Like since about like 2011.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That's so it just, they can get stuff done if they want to, but they'll find a reason to shut down work if they can.
I mean, I think that this gun issue is one of those issues where, I mean, when they have talked about it, the leadership has said, I mean, Paul Ryan was pretty clear he's not going to be getting on the train with this, sort of like, if you look at like Rick Scott or even Marco Rubio, these guys in Florida, Republicans, strong conservatives, NRA supporters, guys that are making moves away from what the NRA wants. That is not the message that we got from Paul Ryan when he did talk about it.
Yeah.
Obviously, his caucus, a lot of them don't want to do it, but it's easier to just not have a vote at all than it is to have one or talk about having one and have it go badly.
This is an interesting sort of a point that Republicans across the board seem to be using. Paul Ryan, I want to play that clip of Paul Ryan yesterday where, people were asking him, are we going to get anything done? Is anything going to happen? What are we going to do? And he just sort of said, like, there's a system. The system just broke down.
There was a colossal breakdown, and we need to get to the bottom of this, how these breakdowns occurred.
And last week when CNN had their town hall, which I am designed to hate the CNN town halls. I don't like these CNN town halls that they do when they have like a fake debate between Ted Cruz and Bernie Sanders. But the town hall last week was remarkable, I thought. And they had Marco Rubio up on stage. They had Ted Deutsch. Rick Scott was not there. They had the sheriff. And they had Bill Nelson was also on stage, and Jake Tapper was sort of the moderator. And Marco Rubio sort of said, like, well, we can't go back to the assault weapons ban because there were so many loopholes and there were so many problems. Like, we can't go back to that. And the students just said, like, it's your job to fix these.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just say, well, this is the system and we can't improve the system. And the system that failed us is the one that we're stuck with.
Frankly, throughout this whole gun debate since the horrible shooting in Florida, we've had a lot of these moments in which people who are not political professionals have looked political professionals in the face and said, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And this has actually been something that's happened quite often on the campaign trail recently. I mean, a lot of there's definitely some argument that kind of conversation, that kind of talk that Donald Trump did on the campaign trail in 2016 helped him to succeed. Obviously, his presidency has not reflected his sort of desire. He sort of claimed that he was going to be this anti-politician really so much as people expected. But this is a very difficult position for politicians to find themselves in, because they have got talking points on talking points on talking points, stacked up. And then someone looks at them and says, like, look, I actually hear what's coming out of your mouth, right? Because, like, politicians don't think that people hear what's coming out of their mouth.
Right.
They sort of say, like, I used to have this joke that, like, a political answer is like, well, instead of answering your question, I'm going to talk around it and then come back to right here.
Yeah.
And that's the entire answer, that they won't do an answer to a question. And
it's sort of universal. I mean, they all have figured out how to do that.
They all do it. But the thing is, what's happening now is you're seeing people are just not having it anymore. Like, I mean, they're a little bit more sophisticated about what the conversation sounds like. They understand their ways about how to motivate people and rally people too, which is like these kids and their understanding of social media. And then when politicians say things like, well, we sure like to do something, but doing something means that other things happen that we have to do things about then. And people say, well, why don't you do things about those things too?
Yeah.
And these politicians are like, blah, blah. I mean, if you saw Marco Rubio, he was like, I guess I'll change my position a little bit. I mean, I think that a lot of this stuff is a bit on inertia, like a bit on autopilot. People haven't checked in with the gun debate in a long time. They haven't checked in with a lot of these debates in a long time. And when they find themselves in trying to sort of roll out their musty old talking points from 3 years ago, they're
getting dunked on.
They don't work anymore.
They're getting dunked on by teenagers.
Right.
And I thought that the most telling interaction that highlights that was at that town hall when that one, the one student, I'm blanking on his name, but he was standing right across from Marco Rubio, looking him in the eye. And he says, will you stop taking money from the NRA? And Rubio didn't. He did exactly what you just said. He found a way around it and he came back around to something else. The kid goes, no. You didn't answer the question. will you take money from the NRA? And Rubio again tried to, and he goes, you still haven't answered the question. And then the crowd got into it. And finally, they had to just like tell the crowd to calm down. And the kid just looked him in the eye and he goes, you have not answered the question.
I mean,
and Rubio was in a flop sweat.
I know, but to be fair, like dunking on Marco Rubio is like dunking on like one of those like 6-foot Nerf bat, like
fair. Totally fair.
3-foot Nerf baskets. I mean, if we can all recall Chris Christie, as his campaign was like like literally falling into the ocean with his like last gasp as he fell into the crevasse, just being like, Marco Rubio is bad at this, and he was like, Marco Rubio just dissembles on the debate stage. So it's not exactly like Marco Rubio is the best at this. But what is interesting is that he did show some signs of shifting, and Rick Scott, the governor of Florida, is too. I mean, it's actually happening under the pressure from these people. The long-term effects of that, who knows? Yeah. And you do have a Republican Congress still, and a lot of Republicans are not interested in doing any of these changes that people are talking about. But the pressure sure seems, at least right now, the pressure seems like a very different kind of argument about pressure. If you think about after the Las Vegas shooting, remarkably heinous shooting. I was in Washington for that one too, and there was like zero conversation about having a conversation about anything. It was like this bump stock thing, and then that was barely mentioned, and kind of we moved on.
It was over by the end of the week.
This is a different level of pressure, and the NRA is not the ones who are driving the ship on this one.
Yeah. Interesting study.
Mixing all the metaphors possible.
I like it. I appreciate that. Quinnipiac University national poll conducted after the mass shooting in Parkland, Florida, shows that 51% of voters said the NRA supports policies that are bad for the United States. The last time that they did one of these polls was after Las Vegas, which was in the early October, the 1st of October. 47% of respondents. So it's gone up 4 percentage points in that short period of time. And I also saw an interesting statistic. Nate Silver from 538 was just sort of, he looked at a couple of different shootings, right, that we've had in recent years. And it typically follows the same pattern, right? We're done with them by a week at most. Mm-hmm. Like I remember after the Las Vegas shooting, it had happened overnight. We did the show that morning. We talked about it for sure, but it wasn't the biggest story of the day.
Even though it was
the biggest mass shooting in American history.
Right.
It wasn't the biggest story of the day. Right. I forget what the other stories were, but it wasn't the biggest story of the day.
That's right.
And then we were done with it.
It took that level of focus and activism, and look, this is how it actually works. I mean, this is the thing I keep telling people. This is how it actually works. Like, if you're loud enough and you keep talking enough, these guys will pay attention.
Yeah.
These guys, I mean, these folks, these politician folks will pay attention to you. It's very hard for people to argue against a lot of the things that the Parkland kids want after this shooting. I mean, I've now heard from several NRA advocates and officials this sort of quip that they have about, like, well, if you want to ban a mass killing machine, ban a spoon because people are dying of, and like, it's not, that's like, that probably plays really well in like the NRA message board, but it's just so lame.
Right.
For that to be your public facing message. And like I said, I don't know where this ends politically. I don't know what the right answer is. I'm not a solutions person. I observe.
Sure.
And all I'm saying is, like, the observation right now is the NRA response is really lame, and the Parkland School students is very innovative. And
it resonates, I think. I want to ask you about a big story from yesterday. We weren't sure where Jared Kushner was going to end up with his clearance in the White House, right? Mm-hmm. He's on this sort of interim security clearance. I'll read directly from Politico. Presidential son-in-law and advisor Jared Kushner has had his security clearance downgraded, a move that will prevent him from viewing many of the sensitive documents to which he once had unfettered access. Ray, I want to play that clip of Senator Richard Blumenthal yesterday, because this was earlier in the day before we knew what was going to happen to Jared Kushner. Blumenthal just kind of said, this is why we're concerned about it.
My main concern right now is that there are an unknown number of high-level White House officials with continued access to the nation's secrets when they may have very damaging secrets in their own backgrounds that could subject them to blackmail, or worse.
So I saw a little bit of this back and forth yesterday about how that wouldn't be possible. That's not a thing. And then all of a sudden, the Washington Post has a story where 4 different countries have said, or a report shows that like they are actually trying to compromise Jared Kushner because he has a massive amount of debt. He has dubious financial ties, and he also has a top secret security clearance in the friggin' White House. And so, like, that is kind of what Blumenthal was saying. China, Israel, United Arab Emirates, and Mexico have all tried to figure out how they're going to compromise the fancy lad
I wish they all
himself.
did it at one meeting, like at one table. Like, I want to see that, like all of them together. Look, this is one of the greatest leaks of all time because, like, this is what's happening right now is sort of an idea that you have the Jared Ivanka side of the Trump administration versus sort of like the John Kelly side of the Trump administration. They don't want Jared to lose a security clearance. He loses a security clearance, and obviously somebody from the Kelly side is like, hey, did you notice? Did you like Rick? You really serious about this?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm a bit of a cynic when it comes to this stuff, and I sort of thought that this security clearance stuff was like a little silly, a lot of it. But I've been talking to people who had top security clearance in other administrations over the past couple of days. And they're like, look, you really, like, this is very, very serious stuff. Like, this is very serious stuff. You can't do the job without the clearance, and you can't get the clearance unless you're really not somebody that they think that can be compromised. I mean, the Rob Porter story, we did a story on it for Vice, on my show at Vice.
7:30 p.m. on HBO.
Weeknights.
Right.
Folks. Stay tuned. There's long Game of Thrones previews, you see before and after.
Nice.
Anyway, but we did a show, and we talked to a former National Security Council staff person for the Obama administration, not a politician, just a NatSec guy, and his concern with the Rob Porter case, of course, Rob Porter being the former staff secretary of the White House who left after it was revealed that there were many allegations of domestic violence against him. His concern was obviously the domestic violence is bad, but that's not what he was worried about. What he's worried about is that the domestic violence is something that Rob Porter could have been blackmailed over.
Yeah.
And I literally was like, come on. And he's like, no, that's the stuff that they're concerned about. So you have this story in the Washington Post about the idea of Jared Kushner, who has a bunch of businesses, has a bunch of debt, has a bunch of things to worry about, and whether or not he could have been compromised, whether or not that's possible, right? Whether or not Rob Porter could have been. No one knows, but when they're doing security clearances, what they're looking for is the potential for pressure points. That's why, in the old days when this country was much more bigoted towards LGBT people, being a member of that community was something that people didn't want people with clearance to have.
Sure.
Right? So what we're talking about is like, this is exactly what loses you a security clearance. So when you talk about the idea of whether or not Jared Kushner should have it or shouldn't have it, or how to get it or didn't get it, this is the kind of thing that anybody who does security clearance vetting for our country would say, nope, can't have it because of that, because of the possibility of it. And that's a very serious thing. And this guy has had it for a long time, since the beginning of the administration, right? Again, you can't say that he's been compromised or it's likely that he would have been. That's not clear at all.
And that's also kind of not
you
the
can't
point.
say this is exactly what security clearance vetting is for.
Yeah.
And we haven't had a lot of it in this administration up until now.
I remember in 2014 when Barack Obama, the scandal du jour, and I'm trying not to spend my time saying like, well, Barack Obama did this and Trump is doing this and that's why it's bad. But you remember when Barack Obama got on the elevator and there was an armed contractor that was on the elevator with him who had an arrest record and he had a gun on him and they didn't know it at the time? People lost their minds. It was back when
pretty dumb.
Yeah. It was pretty dumb. But that's one of the things that people had said. Like, we know he's an armed, Secret Service vetted him kind of, but he had a record and he had a gun on his person and he was in the elevator with the President of the United States. And heaven forbid someone got to this guy.
Right.
But like, that was a real issue. And now the White House is filled with guys like this.
I mean, the vetting process is like a risk. It's like a risk analysis, basically. Yeah. It's like, how risky are you? I mean, look, I know people who've lost it because they smoked weed, they lied about it, whatever. But like, it's a risk analysis system, and if you are viewed as too risky to see things that we don't want other people to see, they won't give you the clearance to see it.
Yeah.
And so so this Washington Post story sort of like that explains very clearly what risk looks like.
Yeah.
Do I think that Jared Kushner is going to like fall prey to a Mexican intelligence service blackmail scheme? I don't know.
Yeah.
But but people thought it's possible.
Sure.
That's what the vetters said.
Yeah.
Or
I mean, look, we live in a time where politics are completely insane.
Yeah.
It's like I said earlier, I don't care what side of the political aisle you are on, right? Like, this is not something that we are used to saying. And like, could that possibly happen? Yeah.
Well, it's the issue of, the length of these temporary security clearances, coupled with the fact that what comes back is things that would not let you get one. That's it. Like, you can get a temporary one because the idea is it takes a lot of time to do all this vetting. They give you a temporary one, and then, usually you clear your way through. But the fact is, we've just seen now another person, Jared, Rob Porter, who have at least reportedly potential pressure points, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, and there are more, by the way, in the White House. It's not just about Jared Kushner. White House is getting ready for the Politico piece. White House aides working on the highest level interim clearance at the top secret / CSI level, SCI level, not CSI.
No, SCI, which
SCI.
is for secure. It's like containment.
Special
It's like,
Victims Unit.
No. That's
sorry.
The information you have to get. Clang.
Right,
That's how you know you have it. No. You have to go into that's the kind of information that's so secret. You have to go into a special room to look at it called a SCIF.
Compartmented information.
There's the big brain. Boom. There's the big brain.
Throw a Google on it.
Yeah, throw a Google on it.
Not sick.
Not sick.
Those facts.
And yes, actually bring something to the table.
Correct.
But they were informed in a memo sent on Friday that their clearances would be downgraded to the secret level, according to 3 people with knowledge of the situation. So, like, when I heard the Rob Porter story, I was like, I have no idea who Rob Porter is. And then I saw who he was. I was like, oh, yeah, that's the guy that hands Trump all of his papers on his desk. I knew it by his face. Like, this is a guy that's, like, the last guy to see everything that the president gets.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I kind of get the outrage and the little freak out over it. I totally get it.
I mean, like I said, the story that we did at the show was a guy who was outraged because he's a security guy. And the security was like, this is what it looks like to be a compromised person. To have a dark secret in your past you don't want anybody to know about. And have somebody come up and say, well, we won't tell that secret about you if you just tell us what you saw today at work.
Right.
Like, and it's not like, this is exactly what security vetting is about. That's exactly what it's for. It's for preventing the potential of that to happen.
All right. So I this is sort of a curveball, but I haven't talked about this story yet. And I really wanted to talk about it today. So they have cut and slashed the budget at HUD, Housing and Urban Department. Ben Carson is the secretary there.
Housing Urban Development.
Housing Urban
Didn't
Development.
You need to Google it.
Sorry. Thank you.
That's right.
And so the New York Times has a story about how Ben Carson, late last year, went and bought a $31,000 dining room set for his office. Now, they are slashing HUD's programs for the homeless, the elderly, the poor. And he went and spent $31,000 on a new dining room set. Now, what would that look like if you were to spend $31,000 on a new dining room set? Well, the New York Times has the details. A custom hardwood table, chairs, and a hutch.
Ooh, a hutch.
A hutch.
Hutch.
I'm shocked there's not a credenza in there. But a hutch.
Hutch, I feel like, is a word I've only heard from when you win one on, like, Price is Right.
Exactly.
I would like to know if there are any murals involved.
Oh, remember, he had that one of him and Jesus in his house in Balmer. A painting of Ben Carson and Jesus. According to the New York Times, top agency staff members filed a whistleblower complaint charging Mr. Carson's wife, Candy Carson, with pressuring department officials to find money for the expensive redecorations to his office, even if it meant circumventing the law. That's from the New York Times.
I see.
Gotta have that hutch.
I gotta have that hutch. I don't care how we get it.
That's a must.
This is okay. So just to be clear, let's just summarize. So we have an EPA director who can't fly and coach because it's a security risk, quote unquote, because somebody yelled at him or something about it. And we have a housing and urban development chief who would rather skirt the law than not to get a $31,000 dining room set in their offices.
Gotta have that hutch. Gotta have that hutch.
The thing is, like, I've seen the HUD building, by the way. Like, I mean, like, so if you're not familiar with Washington, there is a lot of departments that were built sort of in the 60s and 70s that are just sort of like very ugly, sort of brutalist architecture buildings. Like, it's not the best foot forward of American architecture. HHS is one of those. HUD is one of those. I don't know why you'd want to have a fancy dinner party in the HUD office. I mean, you're like having a fancy dinner party in like a bus station.
Right.
Like just sort of like the look of it.
My favorite line from this, Rafi Williams, a HUD spokesman, was actually reached and gave a comment about this. And he says, quote, Secretary Carson did not know that the table had been purchased, but does not believe the cost was too steep and does not intend to return it, end quote. So there you go.
I didn't know anything about this, but I'm keeping it. I did.
The more you know.
Finders keepers.
Look, I mean, this has been this has plagued this administration since the beginning. You know, I mean, Tom Price with the spending on travel, Pruitt, like we're talking about with the spending on travel. Obviously, you know, Steve Mnuchin with some of the stuff that's happened with him and his wife out there. Like, a lot of this is optics, okay? $31,000. Don't go running around thinking this is why, you know, you can't get that housing program that you want. That's not why. Right. You can't get the housing program that you want because Republican Congress won't pass it, or the Trump administration doesn't want to keep it around.
Right.
$31,000 is not breaking anybody's bank.
Right.
Okay?
However.
But this is indicative of what's funny is these guys, like, they talk about how much they hate government. They hate government. They hate government. Hate government.
The swamp.
And as soon as they get into it, look at all those great perks we can get from the government.
It's pretty sweet, right?
It's like everybody like goes and they put on that Matthew Lesko question mark outfit.
Yes.
And they go running around like, look at all this free money from the government. Like it's completely remarkable. And the thing is, if it was reversed, we would, you know, like when Democrats did stuff like this, they got in trouble all the time for the, you know, if people recall, Nancy Pelosi, when she was Speaker of the House, Speaker of the House gave her the privilege of having a military plane fly her back and forth through her district in San Francisco. She used that privilege, and part of that privilege like allowed her to, I think, have a cocktail or two on the plane, which I've been on Air Force One. Cocktails are on the plane. And when that came out, there was a huge pandemonium argument about, like, how dare she? This thing that she is actually granted by law.
Yeah.
This is potentially a story about circumventing the law.
And, like, admittedly, just
for a table.
Yeah. We're going to have more to talk about with Evan McMorris, Santoro from Vice News. And joining us in the next segment will be Emily Atkin from the New Republic, talking about the EPA. We mentioned Scott Pruitt. We'll get into it a little bit with her. So stay tuned. It's the Bill Press Show. Peter Ogbert sitting in for Bill Press today. We'll be right back.
Download our podcast, search for The Bill Press Show on iTunes, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Bill Press Show.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation letter.
You're resigning.
Why? Because you're constantly ignoring me. You're half as active as you used to be, and you eat stuff like this. You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
I forgot. I'll do better. Please, don't quit on me.
Okay, but remember, it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Listen to your heart. Don't let it quit on you.
Let's go for a walk.
Uncontrolled high blood pressure could lead to a stroke, heart attack, or death. Get yours to a healthy range before it's too late.
Adventure can be found anywhere, but the best place to start is in the forest.
I spy something beginning with S.
Snow?
No.
Snow-covered trees.
Nothing to do with snow.
Head outside to discover incredible animals and beautiful plants that come together to create an unforgettable adventure.
Wow.
So grab your loved ones.
Don't
even.
And explore a world of possibilities.
Come on, this way.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find the closest forest or park to you.
I grew up in the housing projects of Cleveland. I didn't even know that life could be any better than it was. Education for me has been a way to get away from the agony of what was normal life. I want to be able to impact the community, not just look back on where I came from, but to reach back to where I came from and pull some people up with me. My name is David, and I am your dividend.
Hamilton was adopted from a rescue in 2008. He really likes to be around people. And as soon as I start to make my breakfast, Hamilton is right there. I get out my mat and I'm doing a downward dog and he's underneath. He's quite the pug about town. He gets invited to a lot of parties. He knows he's a pretty big deal. I mean, look at this little face. How could you not love him?
Live video, Bill's commentary, the best clips from the show, all in one place. YouTube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Bill Press Show. Hi, everybody. My name is clearly not Bill Press. My name is Peter Ogburn. I'm sitting in for Bill today. As we mentioned a couple times throughout the show, Bill was here. He was here 2 hours ago. We were going to start the show, and he didn't have much of a voice, so here I am. Luckily, I have some big brains here with me for the rest of the show. Evan McMorris Santoro, our friend from Vice News, which you can watch weeknights 7:30 p.m. on HBO. And Emily Atkin is here, staff writer at The New Republic. Hi, Emily.
Hi. I hope my brain is big enough to fill the gap.
I always say that whenever I host, it's not what I always do is we have some wonderful, smart people surrounding an empty, vacuous hole, not unlike the way that a donut works. There's just nothing in the middle, and it just surrounds myself. I just surround myself with smart people who can help carry the show.
But it's still fantastic. Donuts are fantastic.
Donuts are wonderful, despite the fact that there is a serious lack of content in the middle. They are still enjoyable and wonderful.
I'm like the sprinkles.
Yeah, hell yeah.
She's the substantive, cakey
I'll
goodness.
The cakey goodness.
I'll take it.
It's good to see you both. I believe the last time you both were here was when you were hosting the show.
That's correct.
So you guys are old friends.
That's right. That was our first time meeting, actually. It was here live on the radio.
Yeah.
It was. I think we have Twittered before, but that was the first time.
Nice.
In person.
Yeah.
Nice. I want to ask you, first of all, you were at CPAC this past weekend, right? You spent some time there? You were covering it or looking at it and
I was.
watching
so,
in?
I normally cover science and the environment and stuff, but our D.C. office, most of the New Republic is based in New York. And so there's only a couple of us at the D.C. office, and so my editor looked at me and he was like, guess who's going to CPAC?
It's you.
And I was like, okay.
Oh, man.
Sure.
I used to go to CPAC, and I told this story yesterday, but I went to CPAC 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago maybe. I just got ossified drunk. I crashed a Breitbart party and just went in and just completely got hammered. And I got cornered by a raving lunatic. That man is now the governor of Kentucky.
Matt Bevin?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, seriously.
What?
True story. True story.
What did he do that was...
I think someone told him that I was one of his constituents, and this was when he was in that weird race. He was challenging Mitch McConnell.
For the primary, yeah.
Yeah. And so he just came over to me, and I have not the most lucid memories of the encounter, but I do remember I was just like, oh, that's who this guy is. And he thought I was one of his constituents and kept talking. He thought that the party was for him.
All right.
Yeah. That's kind of thing CPAC is.
Yeah, I didn't.
Just Peter Ogburn drunk, thinking he's talking to maybe the governor of Kentucky. We're not sure.
Yeah. No, it was definitely him.
Okay.
It was definitely
okay.
Matt Bevin. It was definitely Matt. I knew that because I knew that he was sort of in the news at the time for when he was running against Mitch McConnell.
And he introduced himself to you and said, "Hi, I'm Matt Bevin.
Hi, I'm
future
Matt
governor."
Bevin. Yeah,
you're going to remember this.
Yeah. So
interesting.
Anyway.
All right.
What did you see? What was the vibe at CPAC? Because like we've talked about CPAC for years here on the show, and it's sort of funny because I'm old enough to remember when Ron Paul would win the straw poll all the time, right? For like, who do you want to be president? I don't know if they still do that when there's a Republican president, but it was always Ron Paul. And it was Rand Paul. And that was sort of like that Tea Party crowd. Like, what was the vibe there this year?
So this was my first ever CPAC. I managed to be a reporter in D.C. for over 4 years and never attended CPAC, and that changed.
Congratulations.
So I don't have much to compare it to, but what I'll say is that it seemed to be a hodgepodge of people who thought completely differently on a bunch of different issues. There were people who, the first day I went around and I talked to people about guns, as I think a lot of reporters did, and you had the whole range of people who were saying, who were totally down with the crisis actor conspiracy, the kids in the Parkland shooting weren't actually there, to people who said, I back a moderate form of gun control. Obviously, a lot of kids, a lot of weird racism from people, but also a lot of like total cultural acceptance of other people. There were some trans women who were demonstrating. I believe they did it last year too, who were saying, I'm trans, I'm conservative, I'm part of your team. I'm looking for acceptance. I saw one woman come up to them, high five them, and say, "You have more friends than you think." 5 minutes later, Ben Shapiro delivered the keynote where he said something along the lines of, "And if that's not a woman, that's a man." It's just spewed some transphobic stuff. So it was all over the map for me, and I spoke to way more teenagers than I thought I would.
Yeah, well, that's CPAC. CPAC is pretty much was designed to bring young people to Washington to get them all fired up about being conservatives. I've been to a lot of CPACs, and I think this one was interesting about this one is, you're right. Like people have different opinions about a lot of sort of like in the margin stuff, but for the most part, in a really big way, it was like a pro-Trump event, which was not completely the way CPAC had been, not even that long ago. Like it's just like a couple of years ago. I think it was Trump didn't even go to CPAC or something, and then he because he was afraid he was going to get walked out on. Now he went.
That was one of the. By the way,
it was a Republic. I mean, it was a Trump fest in a way that surprised me as someone who's been going to CPAC for a long time. I think that I had I ran into a guy. This guy was like in his 20s who was sort of like your classic movement conservative type of guy. Like he's a classic CPAC attendee. Like I'm 25. I'm wearing a suit. I want to be at the National Harbor early in the morning. I want to go eat breakfast and watch the Hugh Hewitt show get taped or whatever. Like this guy was like really down for the cause, right? He's really into it. And he was like, I have always wanted to, like this. I mean, it's like one of those things that happens to reporters. Sometimes you get really lucky. I did not, this guy found me in the hallway. I did not find him. I'm not that good a reporter. But he's basically like, my dream for my whole life has been to go to CPAC. Since I was a little kid, I really always wanted to go to CPAC. And now I got here. And there's nothing for me here. That Trump has taken over the entire thing. We got this Le Pen speaking, which to me is like the final nail in the coffin for the kind of conservatism that I believe in. This guy's like, like a Bush type conservative. I mean, like a very conservative person, but he was literally just sort of like, he went because there was because the other thing about CPAC is sort of like a lot of like secondary events happen all around it because it's such a big sort of gravitational pull. So he had gone down to the CPAC area because there was another event going on that he wanted to go to. So he went to that and then was like, I'm just going to go to CPAC because like I've always wanted to do it. It's right up the street. And he went and he was just like despondent. He was like sad about it. And that was, I think, really interesting. that to me was the biggest, takeaway from CPAC when I was there was this kid that was just like, this guy that was just like, I had really this is not the Republican Party or the CPAC or the conservative movement that I expected to be a part of when I was a teenager.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating to me because, like, as I mentioned, whenever Rand Paul and Ron Paul would do so well in these straw polls, right, like establishment Republicans were kind of freaking out. But at least, you can point to some brand of conservatism in the Paul politics, right?
Well, they gamed the system. Like what happened was winning the straw poll was briefly a thing that was a big deal for people who wanted to run for president in the Republican Party. So, like, for example, Mitt Romney, who was not seen as conservative enough because he was the governor of Massachusetts and created Obamacare. When he was running for president in 2008, he made a big deal about winning the CPAC straw poll. Because, like, look at me, I'm conservative.
Yeah.
I'm a conservative guy. And this was like this was like a litmus test. But then after that, the polls just kept sort of like bringing busloads of their supporters in to sort of juice the straw poll. But on stage, there'd be a lot of conversation about different ideas in CPAC, in conservative movement, how to tackle different issues. You'd have libertarianism. You'd have sort of like, super capitalism. You'd have, definitely always the fringy, but always the racist stuff would always be there. Some of that would always be there. But it was a conversation kind of about what the movement is doing next. Granted, I've only gone in years when there was sort of more of an open election for Republicans. But now, with it being heading into the Trump reelection, Trump is president, it was a Trump event. Yeah. It was just that. I mean, with a couple of outliers or a couple of people who said bad things about Trump, but it was a Trump event, and it honestly felt like, I think maybe partially because of that it was kind of low energy. Like CPAC can be pretty fired. I mean, it's a bunch of young people. They're super stoked, and this was sort of like a little bit. I don't know if you got that sense.
Well, sort of. And what I was gonna say is, I think you were lucky to find that dude who would openly admit to you that it wasn't what he expected and that the party wasn't what he had identified with anymore. Because, yes, I would agree it was low energy. I spoke to a lot of people who were walking around being like, I don't know about this or I don't know about that. But I didn't find one person who wouldn't say, who would say, I actually don't like what's happening at CPAC, or the Republican Party is shifting in a way that I don't like. It was mostly a lot of optimism, displeasure couched in optimism, and then an unwillingness to admit, I think, the reality of the situation. I mean, I went to one of those outside panels that was called How to Win Women, right? And within that panel, nobody would admit that the Republican Party is hemorrhaging women or has a problem with women. It was just a panel about how great women are and how to appeal to them in a way that doesn't invoke identity politics. But even afterwards, I went to speak with one of the women who was running the panel, and I just flat out asked her, I was like, so are you doing it? Did CPAC ask you to do this because you guys have a problem with women? And she was like, no, I don't think that's the case, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. I don't know if it's denial that I felt at CPAC or just an unwillingness to outwardly be like, oh, God, what's happening?
You read about science and environmental issues. You have a great piece, Scott Pruitt versus the Pope. I want to ask you about that in just a second. But you also had another CPAC piece about guns, because CPAC happened not long after the shooting in Parkland, Florida. How did they handle that, and what was the vibe that you heard at CPAC from these conservatives about gun safety, gun control?
Well, the piece that I wrote is called "The CPAC Kids Are All Right on Guns," because I decided that I was only going to search out teens or people who were close to teens. I felt that since we had been hearing from teenage victims and talking about how powerful the teenage voice was and how they were the next generation of gun control advocacy, that it would be a good idea to talk to the next generation of their opponents,
totally,
who are the 19-year-olds at CPAC. I found quite a bit of 19-year-olds, weirdly enough, and it was weird to go up to kids and be like, "Hi, are you a teenager?"
Hello, teens.
Are you? Who here is the teen?
I'm just looking for teens.
Weirdly enough, you wouldn't be the only person doing that at CPAC. Sorry.
Or at Netroots.
Or at the
Democratic National Convention. Or the Republican National Convention.
To be clear. Yeah.
It's a ugly, disgusting business, folks.
Yeah.
Anyway,
The takeaway from the piece is I definitely found a few very pro NRA kids, but the vast majority of the 19, early 20-year-olds I spoke to were very much open to a debate in which they talk about, increasing the age limit on buying certain guns, banning bump stocks, increasing background checks. They're not against all the things that the NRA are against. I would say that at this moment, a lot of those 19-year-olds are not sort of gung-ho, but I think a lot of it is because a lot of them aren't gun owners.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of it as well.
But they were like really willing to be like, the NRA is not really saying what I think.
Yeah, I probably met.
The NRA like was all over that place.
All over the place.
Yeah.
The NRA was probably the most paraphernalia that I saw all over the thing. But yeah, I would say that the vast majority, I probably spoke to a dozen teens, were not their political identity did not line up with the NRA. But at the same time, I did speak to one very smart 19-year-old who said to me, listen, because I said, wow, it sounds like you're really willing to compromise on a lot of these issues. He goes, yeah, but I'm 19, and social science shows that people get more entrenched in their viewpoints and unwilling to compromise when they get older. So you might see some optimism right now in the debate, but I think as we get older, it's probably going to be the same stuff.
As I get fed shovels full of garbage for the next couple of years, I'll change.
That is like the saddest. That's like one of those sci-fi movies. Like what's that one where like the thing in your hand changes color and you die when you're like 21 or whatever.
Oh yeah, sure.
That science fiction movie. You know what I'm talking about?
Nope.
I know what you're talking about.
Well, it's a science fiction story, but this is like this kid being like, well, I only have 4 moons left until the hardening, and then like I'm gonna become like just some fucking automaton. Sorry.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm just gonna become some automaton.
The kids,
that's very sad.
But the kids were just so like transparently, like they understood what was BS, They knew what the reality of like their future was going to be. They saw the stickers that someone was handing out that said "I heart CO2," like the owning libs with your like love for pollution, and they were like, "Isn't this stupid?"
Yeah,
So even they knew that was dumb.
But do you feel like I mean, this kid aside with this idea of that I'm gonna that one day I'm just gonna become a straight tardy voter like everyone else.
Well, he said he hoped he didn't.
Right. Okay. Interesting. But with this kid aside, do you feel like do you think that energy might have been like surprising to the NRA? Because it felt like to me that they felt like they were like a really home crowd audience when they were there, right? I mean, Dana Lash gave this speech that was just like this crazy speech that said, the media loves mass shootings. The NRA spokeswoman Wayne LaPierre gave his speech in which he sort of like attacked the FBI, a lot of things that Trump wanted. And then you're finding that in the crowd there are kids who are like maybe a little bit more skeptical of what the NRA has to say.
I would say that the NRA probably didn't get a feeling of that because they would have had to go up to those kids and talk to them. If they're the ones giving speeches and they're the ones, doing these events, they're going to be, like I said before, it's not like these kids were really willing to go up and be like, screw the NRA and this isn't what I feel. It's sort of like these private conversations where they're like, yeah, well, I think maybe that's not what I'm into at this moment. But they're not yelling about it at CPAC.
Right.
I'd be surprised if did the NRA have like a guy that was going around surveying people like, what's your feeling about the NRA? I don't think that happened.
But that's really interesting to think about that.
Yeah.
Because the idea that like they're still talking to you, they're not listening, that may explain a lot why their politics are not going so well right now.
Did you see the part where the NRA like VP gave Ajit Par a gun on stage for all his great work repealing
They have
net
a history
neutrality?
of doing this.
They
They give away guns on the stage of CPAC.
I didn't know that. That was a new thing for me.
And they give it to like one of the greatest photos ever taken is just Mitch McConnell. They give it to Mitch McConnell, and he's like. Mitch McConnell. this is not a guy who goes out shooting.
No,
this is not. This is a sip of a bourbon kind of guy.
Right.
And he's just like holding this giant. They give him this like giant sort of, flintlocky looking rifle. They give it to all of them.
Yeah, I was
weird,
laughing.
right?
I was laughing. I was like, oh, the FCC chairman gets a Kentucky long gun. Like, thank you for your political service.
Yeah.
It
should have been like a duck hunt blaster.
Right. That would make a lot more
FCC.
sense. That would make a lot more sense.
Huh?
All right,
You should be a consultant for the NRA.
we only have a couple minutes left. I really wanted to ask you about this. Your headline really grabbed me. Scott Pruitt versus the Pope, of all people. Now, the Pope has come out, and he really has embraced this sort of evangelical environmentalism, right? Like, he's sort of put himself out there as being a defender of these causes, and Scott Pruitt clearly is not. So what's the deal? What's going on with these two?
Well, I did this piece because Scott Pruitt has sort of been giving interviews recently justifying his ideology for the environment, repealing environmental regulations, making it a little easier for companies to extract oil and gas, and his justification for it is within his faith that God gave us these natural resources. He granted us, dominion over the earth, and we should use these resources to benefit ourselves and to feed the world. Is basically his spiel, and that is what I found sort of like a fringe version of theology. And I contrasted it with the Pope because in 2015, I don't know if you remember, he released his climate change encyclical.
Yeah.
And it was a huge deal. And I was covering climate change at the time, just scrambling, getting ready for what's this encyclical? I know it's going to be huge. And it leaked a couple days early. And myself and my colleague at the time, Jack Jenkins, we got a translated version from an Italian speaker. And we found not only that the Pope was presenting this very moral case for tackling climate change and keeping natural resources in the ground, he was directly rejecting another faith talking point that said that God granted us dominion to use whatever we wanted. God granted us the right as humans, as the highest soul beings, to exploit and extract whatever we want. The Pope, that's what the purpose of the encyclical was. It was because it's a form of Catholic teaching, right? And the teaching is that your dominion does not equal domination. It equals stewardship and care, and with this climate change issue, it's even more so. So I did this piece to contrast Pruitt's Baptist, admittedly not Catholic faith, and then I spoke to some theologians who were like, no one thinks that anywhere except the U.S. BT dubs. And I was like, oh, cool.
To the faith-based community, obviously in this country, we consider it like part of the conservative movement, and usually takes the side of big business and things like that. And to the environment, you're saying that across the world, that's not necessarily the case.
At least that's what a couple theologians told me. And one of the guys I spoke to, Reverend Dave Bookless, he's in Europe, and he was like, in Europe, we don't talk about this here. It's just very like southern corners of the U.S. where they're actually debating whether dominion means domination. And even in the U.S., you'll see evangelical groups that are environmentally minded. It's not, even in the conservative Southern Baptist denomination that Pruitt is from, it's not black and white whether or not they are in line with the Pope or in line with what Pruitt has sort of said his ideology is.
Good stuff. Go read her work at newrepublic.com. That'll do it for today's show. Thanks to Evan McMorris Santoro from Vice News. You can watch 7:30 p.m. weeknights on HBO. Follow him on Twitter at EvanMCS. You can follow Emily Atkin on Twitter at MORWEE, MEMORWEE. And read her good work at newrepublic.com. That's it. We'll be back tomorrow, folks. Thanks.
It's the Bill Press Show.